Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you another conversation with Barbara Karnes, who is a hospice nurse, teacher, author, and really world-renowned expert on end of life and dying. And we're talking all about the dying process, what family caregivers need to know, and what to do and how to help when a loved one is dying. It's a great conversation, very informational. So if you know someone who's caring for a loved one at the end of life, this could be a good episode to share. So I hope you enjoy listening to this. Make sure you've subscribed to this channel down below, and also subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. You can go to eoluniversity.com/support. There you'll find 3 different ways you can make a small financial contribution, which will help keep this channel and the podcast on the air. And thanks in advance if you choose to do that. So now we'll move on with my conversation with Barbara Karnes. Today, I'm so happy to welcome back my return guest and my friend, Barbara Karnes. Barbara is an internationally recognized author, speaker, thought leader, and expert on end-of-life care and the dynamics of dying. And we've been doing regular conversations together for the last couple of years, and I always look forward to these times when we get to share with one another. But you should know Barbara is the author of Gone From My Sight, The Dying Experience, which is referred to as the Little Blue Hospice book. And if you work in hospice at all, you've probably seen it, and your hospice probably owns it and has it and gives it out to patients and their families, because it has sold over 30 million copies worldwide, is published in 12 languages, and remains the leading resource on the market today, educating families on the signs of approaching death. And Barbara has also written By Your Side, a guide for caring for the dying at home, and many other books, and she's working on new books as well. So Barbara, welcome, and thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always such a pleasure to be here and visit with you.
Yeah, we always have such great conversations, and I really look forward to these. And I got inspired for today's topic because my dear aunt died a few weeks ago at the age of 93. And she's someone I've always been close to, and I managed to get there to see her before she died, but it was on her last day of life. But I got there in time to sit with her and her family, and it became clear to me how many questions her family, her members who were acting as caregivers, had about the dying process itself. And I realized this is just so hard for the average person who's never seen someone die, has no idea what the natural dying process looks like. And they're filled with questions and concerns and fears and doubts about it. So I thought this would be a good topic for you and I to talk about and just focus in on for one, even though we've talked about it in the context of other conversations, but to really focus in on it today. And I'm so grateful to have you here, because this is exactly what you write about in Gone From My Sight and other books of yours.
Well, in this country today, we don't really have any role models on what it's like to die. So family and caregivers don't know what to expect. And because we bring fear with us, fear of the unknown, fear of the not knowing, that fear intensifies and really gets in the way of a really meaningful experience. And for end of life workers, the goal is the patient's death. And in that goal, it's to support and guide everyone in that family up to the moment of death, following the death and bereavement, and help that family have a sacred experience instead of one filled with fear. And then they will have a sacred memory that they'll carry with them forever. So that's our work.
And it's so true. And I think to those of us who've worked in this arena for a long time, we know what to expect. The dying process, we understand it really well and we see it happen. It's not surprising to us. And so I guess I had sort of forgotten how it might look to someone who's never seen someone go through the natural dying process before, how many concerns they had, and even how many times they were tempted to call 911 or take her to the emergency room because they just didn't understand what was happening.
Well, and our movie role models, and that's really today the only role models we have, someone saying something very profound, everyone's listening, and then they gasp, close their eyes, and they're dead. And people don't die like that. But people, families who's watching, think something's wrong because mom didn't die like the actor did on television. So education is 90% of our work, and education is what will neutralize the fear that everyone brings to the bedside.
Exactly. And that's why I thought this conversation is probably one of the most important we could have to help educate people on the signs and changes to watch for that are all normal, all part of the natural process of dying, not to be feared, not to be alarmed by, so that when they sit with someone who's dying, they know what to expect and they can understand what's happening.
Shall we start?
Sure.
Okay, let's start. Let me clarify. There's only two ways to die. You either die fast, get hit by a truck, heart attack, suicide, or you die gradually. And gradual death is from disease or old age. Old age takes longer, but gradual death has a process to it. And that process begins 2 to 4 to sometimes even 6 months before death actually comes. And there are three things that we can look for that tell us this gradual dying process has begun. One, a person is asleep more than they're awake. Two is socialization. And three is food. All of these three things change months before death. Starts off, person stops eating meat. And then pretty soon it's fruits and vegetables. Then it's anything that takes energy to digest. Then it's soft foods. And in the weeks before death, you're doing good if you can get some Ensure or some kind of protein drink, and even sips of water or Gatorade. And this is what's supposed to happen. We eat to live. And if the body's preparing to die, it doesn't want the food or the energy that food brings. Um, Sleep. Months before death, a person's sleeping habits change. They start with an afternoon nap, and then pretty soon it's a morning and an afternoon nap. And then they're asleep all evening in front of the TV. You wake them up, put them to bed, and they sleep all night. And then one day they don't get out of bed and they're asleep more than they're awake. And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. The third thing is socialization. Again, months before death. The guy that always watched football, his favorite team, no longer interested, no longer says, what's Nebraska doing now? And then it's, don't have the church ladies come over. I'm really too tired. And then it's don't have the grandkids come over. I just want to rest. And then one day they've gone completely inside. It's like they're disconnecting all their threads and they're building their place in another world, and they have to totally disconnect from everything. That's gradual dying.
And I wanted to say, Barbara, sometimes in those early stages, months before dying, I've seen people get diagnosed as having depression because of those very symptoms, sleeping more, withdrawing, and not eating. And some people, because most doctors don't understand the natural dying process either, and they may misdiagnose the person as being depressed and start them on medication, which usually doesn't do anything. It doesn't help or make any difference.
Right. The other thing is that in the months before death, if you've been told you can't be fixed and that at some point in the near future you're going to die, you're going to be depressed. You know, that is a natural consequence of the diagnosis of a life threatening illness. So I'm not opposed to an antidepressant in the months before death because maybe it'll help a little bit. But what you're going to do is still monitor food, sleep, um, and socialization, because that will continue as no matter whether you have an antidepressant or not.
That's so true. And it's really so important for families and caregivers to be able to see that sign, that change in things, and recognize we're in a different phase now than we were before. Now we are approaching death. And, so now we need to be present for our loved one, maybe in a different way than we were before.
Well, and we go through labor to get into this world, and we go through labor to leave it. So I've given you the food, socialization, sleep months before death, but weeks before death, 2 to 3 weeks, we'll say 1 to 3 weeks before death, there are other changes that are going to occur. And I call it labor because we're working to get out of our body. We go through labor to get into this world, and we go through labor to leave it. So what you're going to see is you walk into a room and the person is sound asleep with their eyes partially open. 1 to 3 weeks before death, one of the major signs. Not everyone does everything I'm going to talk about. Some people will do everything, some people will do none, but most people will do some of the things that you and I are talking about. So you walk in the room, eyes partially open. They're restless, they're agitated, they're picking at the air. They can't seem to get settled. Sometimes they're asleep and you can wake them up and talk to them. And other times you wake them up and you just know that nobody's home. They're just not there, even though they're awake. And their breathing starts changing. And we normally breathe, 16, 20 times a minute. Now, you look at him and you think, oh my gosh, he's dead. He's not breathing. And then he'll start breathing again and then stop. I call it start and stop breathing.
Mhm.
But, it's a good description. And that's part of the dying process. All of those things, they'll come and go in the weeks before death. But that labor, just like a woman giving birth to a child, their labor begins and then it intensifies as time goes on. And it's the same with the labor to leave this world. So there will be other changes that will signify days and hours.
And one of the things that was my family members were concerned about with my aunt, they kept telling me just like 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, she was sitting up. She was talking with us and having conversations. And how could things happen this quickly? But in reality, she'd been changing all along, as you said, for the past few months, and they hadn't recognized that that was the beginning of the dying process. But it is true when someone suddenly is asleep much more than they're awake. We may not have remembered that, oh yeah, they were taking a lot more naps already before this for weeks. We may not realize that. It just can seem sudden and shocking when it happens.
Oh, it's really scary when we caregivers who don't understand the dying process, who don't know that there is a process, um, that's really scary. And with labor, you mentioned that, person's eating, talking, and 2 weeks later, they're on death's door, literally. Um, with labor, some women sneeze, out pops the baby. Other women, 36 hours later, they're still trying to push this little guy into the world. Well, so it is with our labor to leave this world. Some of us can get out of our body quicker and easier than others. So for me, that explains why you can be doing uh, sitting up in the chair and drinking your Ensure, and 2 weeks later, stop breathing. You had a shorter labor.
Mhm. And that it's so important that we recognize this. It's still the same process. It's just that things are happening and the changes are coming faster, and the person's moving through all those stages more quickly than someone else might. And when we looking back, you and I have talked about this before, but at the 2 to 3 months before death, when a person loses interest in eating, I just want to emphasize again, because we did have a whole conversation on it, that if that feels very alarming to family members and caregivers, they feel that the most important thing they could do is get their loved one to eat something. But in fact, it is normal to start refusing food, and the families have to learn about that and understand it in order to get comfortable with that.
Well, as caregivers, one of the things we can do is provide food for our special person. And we look at it from so many different angles. We socialize over food. We use food as an expression of love. There's all kinds of aspects, but bottom line is we eat to live. It's the gas we put in the car to make it run. But caregivers, and I will speak for myself, a lot of people know my husband just died, and I know all this stuff, and yet I pushed him to eat. Months before, when he stopped eating regularly, I did everything I could to get him to eat until one day he literally told me to leave the room. And I got in the hall and I cried. And I realized that I was trying to keep him alive with everything I could. I was trying to keep him alive, and his body was trying to die. Always offer, just don't force. And
Yeah.
that's the caregiver, hardest thing ever.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say it's totally natural. That feels like the most important part of your job, to make sure they have nourishment and nutrition. And I was even thinking about, you were talking about what the social aspect of eating together, and I was thinking of a family member bringing dad's favorite cherry pie that he always loved, thinking, I want to have one last time of sitting down and eating cherry pie with my dad, and kind of the grief and devastation of finding out dad's not interested in that anymore. And there are just so many losses we have to experience as we watch the people we love go through these changes as they approach dying. And And it's possible we won't ever get to share with them. We won't share a meal like we used to or socialize in the way we used to around food with that person we love.
We have to remember that they are disconnecting all of their threads, everything that holds them to this planet. They're disconnecting. And that's how we die if we don't get run over by a truck. That's how we die, is we gradually, unconsciously, because if you ask, are you sleeping on all this time on purpose? No, I'm not. I'm just fine. It's all unconscious. The body is doing it. The mind has no input into it. The body is letting go and doesn't want the food, wants the sleep, doesn't want the socialization.
Yeah. I was just thinking of how I wrote a blog about this, about being a caregiver for my mom, and how for all those little things, it's like every single day there are new losses when you're taking care of someone who's in the process of dying. And that, in a way, if we could reframe it and change our mindset, we could realize like what a privilege it is to get to be there for the last meal our loved one ate, or the last time we were able to share a cup of coffee together. I mean, to witness the things that are being unplugged and let go of, as painful as it is, but to be part of that process and start grieving it and start letting go of all those things that we think of as being important parts of our loved one, but actually things the loved one has to let go of and be rid of in order to leave this planet and their body.
If we can, as caregivers, as observers, can let go of our expertise, our expectations, and kind of, what's the term, go with the flow,
Mm-hmm.
go with whatever is happening in the moment. Most of us live either in the past or in the future. And being at the bedside as someone is dying, that's forcing you to be in the present. And that's a gift. That's a gift to experience this given moment. And it can be very special and very sacred.
Oh, it's so true. And to get to that place of appreciating the sacred, we have to let go of all of our attachments to it too, of how we wish it would be, or what we wish would happen, or and just be there for what actually is happening and allow it to take place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful thought, in a way, that's what makes it sacred, is that it's just what it is. It's just pure love, in a way, and we remove all of our expectations or all of our previous ideas of how it might be.
And I think that if we can let loose, let go of the fears that we've accumulated about dying and death, all of us have accumulated fears uh, over our lifetime. And all of those fears tend to surface when we're at the bedside of someone who's dying. And if we can let go of those, if we can let go of the fears and just be in the moment, we will have a very special experience that we'll carry with us forever.
So, so true. And now we were talking about 2 to 3 weeks before someone dies, but there's also another kind of pivotal shift, in a way, around 3 days or so before someone dies, that we should talk about as well.
Okay, I would say days to hours that you're going to see other changes. One is the person's going to probably be non-responsive. They may be talking, they may be moving around, but they're not making sense and their movements are aimless. Um, they may be doing hand movements, picking the air, which is a continuation from the weeks before. their coloring changes, their skin color changes. And what happens is we call it mottling, where their hands and feet get a darker color and they get cold. And that's because the circulation is slowing down and it's not doing what it's supposed to. But that's a key sign. Mottling is of days to hours. You're also going to look at a blood pressure. The blood pressure is going to get lower and lower. Normal blood pressure, 120 over 80, although I think they're lowering it a little bit. And now it's 90 over 60. Maybe you can't even hear a blood pressure. All of this says the body's shutting down. Now comes a real scary thing that nobody expects because nobody did it in the movies. And that just before death, the person will start breathing like a little fish breathes when you take it out of water. You know how their mouth opens and closes, and that gets slower and slower. And maybe they're taking 5 or 6 breaths a minute when we would normally take 15 to 20 a minute. And then there is a facial expression change. Now, person has their eyes open, they're partially open, they're non-responsive, they're breathing like a little fish, and suddenly their head moves. There may be a frown or a grimace. There may be a tear. Following that movement, there will be 1 or 2 or 3 long spaced out breaths where you think you're not going to take another breath, and they do. And then they're gone. That compared to birth, that is when the laborer has allowed the birth into the other world. I believe that a person can hear you, even in the moments following death, which I can't prove, I just believe it. And so it's really important to encourage everyone there to talk to the special person. I try in the hours before death to get each individual go in the room alone and talk with their special person. Talk about the good, talk about the challenging. There's no perfect relationship, you know, because the life is like a billion-piece jigsaw puzzle. And the person who's dying is trying to put all those pieces together on so many different levels. And so if we share our relationship and our thoughts and our feelings, that's more pieces of the puzzle that they can put together. So I think that's really important for each person to have that opportunity, and know that the person that's dying can hear you while you're doing that.
Mm. I love that. And it's such a good reminder to don't stop talking to the person that you're caring for, even though they can't respond and they may show nothing, like no sign whatsoever that they hear you, but keep talking to them because it's important for you and for them to be able to hear what it is you need to express.
Well, and along with that is be careful what you say in front of them. Um, Even though they're non-responsive, uh, being able to hear, you don't want to say really negative things in your relationship and in talking about the relationship. Yes. Say to them, you know, Dad, when you took me out behind the garage and you beat the tar out of me, I still hurt from that. That's good. But to stand at the bedside and argue with each other, yell at each other with all the tension and family dynamics. That's not helpful. And they can hear you.
And I was with one family that, as their loved one's breathing was becoming more irregular, started saying, "Don't go, don't die, Dad, don't go, don't leave us." And it was very hard to explain to them. They said, "Well, we just want him to know how much," that's our way of saying how much we love him. But I I think that that is one of the things that could potentially be harmful to the person dying who's confused. They're trying to detach from these relationships and then to think, oh no, if I go now, it's causing pain for my loved ones. We don't want
I,
them to be distracted by that thought.
I will tell you a story. Perfect example of this. Young man, probably 17 years old, his grandma, who raised him, is dying minutes. And he's holding her hand. And every time she'd stop breathing, he'd start yelling at her, "Mama, Mama." And she'd start breathing again. And this went on for, do I say hours? At some point, I said, Mama's trying to stay here for you. Can you tell her that you understand she has to leave, that you're going to miss her terribly, but you know she has to leave? He repeated my words exactly and ran out of the room. I heard the front door slam, and Mama stopped breathing, and she didn't start again.
Mm.
She needed that permission. She was trying so hard to stay for him. We have limited control over the time that we die. Operative word, limited.
Yeah, I suppose that would be somewhat equivalent to saying to when a woman is in birth labor, saying, "Don't push, don't let the baby come, hold back, don't let the baby come," when you're working against nature and when what is trying to happen before your very eyes.
Perfect example. Perfect.
Well, one thing that I witnessed from my family members is that they felt very frustrated that the hospice workers could not tell them exactly when my aunt would die. And so they kept saying, well, if they can see these signs, if they see, how come they don't know exactly when she'll die? And so I realized that's another misconception people may have. We understand the dying process, we see it unfolding, we recognize the signs, but we still can't predict down to the minute or something when a person will actually die, because for, as you were saying before, for some it takes a longer time, for others it's a faster process.
Well, and there's so many dynamics that go into dying. And so a person has limited control over the time that they die. You know, often I see people die once everyone's left the room, or the daughter that says, "I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be with mom. She's not going to die alone." And she gets up to go pee and mom dies. That can be a protection. Mom's taking care of that daughter. Or the other side of that is son's coming in from out of town and he walks in the room and says, "Mom, I'm here." And then she stops breathing. Because this is why you talk to the person that's dying. You tell them what's going on. "Mom, we're all going to go home now," or "We're all going to go eat dinner." Um, you say, "John's coming in, he'll get here tonight." Fill them in, because we have limited control over the time that we die.
Mm. Yeah, so very true. And we have to just accept that this is the mysterious part of dying. I guess while the process of dying we can understand and write about and talk about as we are, but how it actually unfolds for each person individually, it's somewhat mysterious. Why do some people hang on? I've seen people hang on sometimes for a week or longer because they were waiting. We thought they were waiting for someone who was out of the country who had to get back. I've seen other people die so much faster than we could have even imagined. And so to me, that part is a mystery, and we are not going to be able to figure it out, and we can't be accurate in any type of prediction we try to make.
No, really, the closest we can get. And I have a problem with anyone who says, you've got a disease and you've got 6 months to live, or mom's going to die and she's got 2 weeks. We cannot be so specific as to put a number on how long someone has to live. We can say months, we can say days, hours, but that's as close as we can get because of all these dynamics. We die the way we've lived, we die according to our personality, and we have limited control over the time that we die. So we can't. I don't, and I get real upset with physicians that will say, yes, you've got cancer of whatever, and you've got 6 months. Go put your affairs in order. I get really upset with that because you can't be that specific.
So true. And I was thinking from the caregiver perspective, maybe we can go back through these stages we've talked about and think about what's the most important thing for the caregiver to do, say at that 2 to 3 month stage, if they've been informed and if they understand it seems like my loved one is starting this gradual dying process. Um, so recognizing why they're sleeping more, why they're starting to refuse to eat and withdrawing socially, because as caregivers, we want to do something. We always want to do something. Um, what's the most important thing we could do that could be of help at that stage?
I think that it's presence, and I don't mean with a bow, I mean being there. And that presence doesn't mean there has to be conversation. Um, it can be sitting and reading a book out loud. It can be being in the room and having favorite music on. But that presence is more important than any words that are ever going to be said. So, in the months before death, um, if you can live each day, if you can make each day special, something that was, oh, we sat on the porch and watched the squirrels eat from the bird feeder. Something you can do special together, I think is really um, helpful in the months before death. In the weeks before death, just being there, there isn't really going to be anything that you can do to change or make this different. In the hours before death, that's when the person's non-responsive. That's when each person goes in and says what their heart needs to say. When the person is non-responsive, say it all. Um, so we're so used to being in fix-it mode that it's hard to be in present mode, to just be there without an agenda, just be there. And I think that's more healing and more comforting than anything else we caregivers can
Mm.
do.
I think you're right. And that makes me think of creating kind of a safe container for your loved one in which they feel safe to die, like they feel safe to disconnect from the world. There's no pressure on them. There's nothing for them to worry about or take care of. We're fine. Those of us here for you, we're all okay. We're together. We're going to take care of one another. And we're creating this place, this sacred space in which you are safe and there's no anxiety for you. You can do whatever you need to do on your journey. And I think it surprises people that their loved one who's dying may not be that interested in them, in the caregiver. Like, they have their own work to do, and they may not be that interested in talking to the loved ones around them, or, you know, that may not be the focus of what they need to work on. And that's the other thing I think we have to be prepared for and present for is it's not about us, it's their process that they're going through.
It is. And they're disconnecting their threads. They're letting go of anyone out and around them and all the emotional attachments that we have to other people. They're beyond that. They've let go of that. Their job, and the only job they have, is to get out of their body. Everything else you want, hopefully, you've got months or a lifetime to develop a relationship and do and say what you want to do and say. In the hours, often days before death, it's too late to do that now. The
Mm.
person that's dying is literally like that baby working to get out of the birth canal. And the person that's dying is working to get out of their body. And that's the focus.
Yeah, so we have to be not take anything personally, but I just
Mm.
remember trying to offer my mom one thing after another. Can I massage your legs? Do you need another blanket? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want music? Do you want? And she said no to everything, and I and kind of sighed almost, which said to me, "Oh, she wants me to leave her alone. I'm trying too hard to do too many things, all of which are forcing her to stay attached in the here and now, because she has to keep answering my questions or responding to me when what she really needs is to be left alone in some ways, like with my presence and space there, but not asking her things or trying to do something for her." And I loved you said how much we wish we could fix it, and we think we should fix everything.
And we can't. I mean, this is a normal, natural process of living. You know, we are born, we experience, and then we die. It's the name of the game. And we as humanity, or not humanity, we as Americans have really lost touch with the natural way that death comes. You know, it used to be grandma lived at home in the upstairs bedroom, she died. But that doesn't happen as much anymore. And we went through cycles. We're trying to come back to that. But in order to do that, we've got to educate and be educated on what dying is like and how it happens. Because we used to see it, we don't now.
Yeah. I just was reminded of in the movie Forrest Gump. I don't know if you saw that movie, but when his mother dies and she's upstairs in the bedroom and he is trying to grasp death and dying and what that means. And she just says to him, "It's my time. It's my time, Forrest." And I think that simple idea, it's really something we don't talk about, or even we don't even think that way anymore. Western medicine has almost decided, well, no one has a time. We're gonna we're gonna change all that. We're gonna control it. No one is gonna die at any sort of
My
time
watch.
limit. And
Yeah.
but I loved it, and I found it so comforting in Forrest Gump that she could tell him, "It's just my time. It's time for me." And that mindset makes sense to me.
And we'll all have a time because that's the name of the game. All of us will. And we will grieve for those that have gone before us because that's life. We will miss them. But I would hope that we as humanity can get to a place where we understand that it's going to happen to all of us.
Mhm.
And there are situations and times. There's an appropriate time to stop trying. there's an appropriate time where we Americans tend to not recognize that it's time for mom to go. That's why we do CPR. That's why we have the coding and, you know, because we don't recognize that, yeah, it's time.
And when we do recognize that it's time, I think it changes everything because suddenly you can just be present. Your mind isn't focused on how can I stop this? How can I change what's happening and change this course or extend mom's life a few more days or a few more weeks? You're just relaxing in this moment and being there and watching it unfold before your eyes because it's totally natural and it's what's meant to be. And so to be able to accept it in that way and even see for whatever reason this was the timing for mom and it's the perfect time right now because it's her time.
And that will support that acknowledgement that mom died because mom's work was done, because she died. Her time was done. That acknowledgement can bring us comfort in the time when we're missing her. You know, that um, we're all going to grieve, and that's another whole process. But we really start grieving mom's death from the moment of diagnosis. We just don't acknowledge that that's going on, but we're grieving uh, her death right away.
Yeah. Yeah, so very true. Just that simple awareness changes everything. And it's why I think it's so important that we be able to have conversations like this. So, to inform the uninformed, people who don't know anything about the dying process, but also to inform the people who work in this field who maybe have forgotten that other people don't know these things. They've maybe forgotten how important it is to always teach the basics to every family member and patient that you work with. And because I think we get wrapped up in doing our jobs and forget how little other people know about death and dying.
Oh, most people don't, because if I talk about dying, well, then I might surely die. So we're kind of ostriches with our head in the sand,
Yeah.
and don't talk about it. Don't make advance directives. And I'm not going to die. Everyone else dies, but I'm not going to. You know, that kind of belief. But it's not true. It's not a valid thought. So we would all do much better if we had our advance directive, if we planned ahead for the time that death comes, and it will.
And as much as people don't want to think about death or even learn about it or know about it until they're in the situation, I think it actually really helps to know about these stages of dying and what natural dying looks like long before you need to know about it, before your loved ones are there, before you're a caregiver, before you yourself are facing it, because then it just becomes a fact of life, a reality of life that you live with for your whole life.
Before you're emotionally involved in the outcome of what you're learning. You know, if you learn about end of life before you need it, you can view it from an intellectual level. But if you're immersed in someone special to you dying, then that information will be received into you differently because your emotional um, feelings, your emotional involvement are going to get in the way of really having this beautiful experience.
And I wanted to mention again your book, The Little Blue Book, Gone from My Sight, which many, many hospices give that book out to families who are caring for a loved one at home. And written at a fifth grade level. It's easy to read, it's short, and it covers everything we've talked about today for the most part. Um, but it is a book, so everyone thinks of it as, oh, a book that you only need it when someone is ready to die, a few days before someone dies. I think it's a book everyone should actually read long before that point, and to familiarize themselves with what dying is like, take away some of the fear around it, help them feel a comfort in a way like, oh, I know what it's like. I get that. And then the book is on hand when they need to review it and go back and look specifically at those stages. But I feel like it's a book people should have on their bookshelf right now, no matter what stage of life they're at.
I I agree. And that's why I wrote it short, you know, large print, fifth grade level, no medicalese, uh, so that it's a quick read. You might want to read it more than once to really get everything down in your mind. But if you read it before you need it, then you're not letting fear overlay what you're reading. And you can be much more objective if
Mm.
you don't need to read it.
I like that slogan. Read it before you need it. I think that's a
There
good
you go.
that's a good slogan here in death education. Read
There is,
about death before you need the information and you'll be far better off.
yes, absolutely.
Well, so we talked about Gone from My Sight that people can get on your website, bkbooks.com, and also on Amazon.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes.
Is it better if they come to your website? Better for you, probably sales wise.
It will also, do I dare say, save you a little bit of money if you come to our website rather than go to Amazon. Don't tell Amazon I said that. Um,
No, no, it's just between us.
yeah. But yes, you can get it. Go to my website, and I've got blogs you can read. You can see all the materials. I've got DVDs that you can get, podcasts like this. I've got all kinds of podcasts on there. It really is a source for education in regards to end of life. And you can spend a lot of time there just learning about end of life. I mean, at the blogs, go in the search and you could put signs of approaching death in the search bar, and you're going to get all the blogs that were ever written about signs of approaching death. And you can read them, as many or as few, but you will educate yourself.
So true. You can kind of create your own curriculum for yourself. And by going to your website and looking at books, you'll get to see all the books that Barbara has written because we mentioned some of the subject matter from Always Offer, Never Force, which is about nutrition at the end of life. There is let's see, I've got the name here again. Oh, By Your Side, a guide for caring for the dying at home, which is an excellent book for caregivers that it's a great gift to give to caregivers who are taking care of someone. And so you can see all those books on the website. And I think people can buy different bundles of books together because there's a book about grief, a book about pet loss, I think. There's so many. I
Yeah.
lose.
Dementia, um,
Yeah,
which is um, a big what? A big
big topic.
today. It really is. It's huge. Pain management. There's a booklet on pain management. So just about anything you can think of in relationship to end of life, I probably have a booklet about it.
Yeah, yeah. So the website, you'll find all of that. And I highly recommend it, bkbooks.com. Barbara, you've been such an amazing gift to this whole world, your entire career of end of life, all the work that you've done and you continue to do by having conversations like this, and you're still writing books. And I'm really in awe of you and so grateful that we're connected and that we get to have these conversations.
Oh, thank you. You know, we've become a friend, I think, in sharing the same belief system, this in relationship to end of life. There's um, there's a special place in my heart for you.
Same here. Well, I hope listeners have enjoyed our conversation, and we'll get together again in a few months and have another one. But until then, thank you, Barbara.
Oh, thanks for getting us together again, and we'll do it soon.
You're you're welcome. Bye.
Okay.
I hope you find that conversation with Barbara Karnes helpful and useful. Be sure to share it with other people. And I will be back next week with another new conversation for you. Until then, take care. Bye bye.